Let's talk about pulsars in FTL. Pulsars deal ion damage to your ship and the enemy ship. The timing of these pulses is randomized between 11 and 18 seconds. You also get a warning sound exactly 5 seconds before the pulse hits, and together with that, a message up here. As the pulse triggers, the screen will flash. The ion damage is applied exactly when the screen is at maximum brightness, so not just yet, but you can see this ring in the background expanding and the screen is getting brighter. On the next frame or two, the ion damage will be applied, just there. The pulse will always ionize 2 systems. The choice of system is completely random with one important exception, that is shields. If the shield system has any power in it at all, then it will always be ionized. And then the other system will be chosen completely at random. Even if we put a Zoltan in the room here and provide just one power, then that's enough to guarantee that our shields are always ionized. And I can speed it up. You'll see every single time the shields are getting hit. If instead we remove all power from the shield system, then the pulsar may not hit our shields. It's not guaranteed, we don't know. The systems are chosen completely at random. The amount of ion damage that is taken by a system is completely predictable. It depends on the amount of power that is in the system at the time that the ion pulse hits. Let's call the ion damage I and the system power S. The formula for calculating I is S plus 2 all over 2 and then rounded down. So for example, in this case we have 8 power in shields, and that is going to be 8 plus 2 is 10, all over 2 is 5. Rounded down is still 5. So at 4 shields we're going to take 5 ion damage. There we are. The same formula applies to subsystems. Even though they don't actually use any power, they can still be ionized. So for example here, our door system took 2 ion damage. Now the amount of damage that the subsystem takes is dependent on the level of the subsystem. So our doors were level 3. If we use our formula, that's 3 plus 2 is 5. Over 2 is 2.5, rounded down is 2. That's why it took 2 ion damage. However, notice that we're manning our sensors. And if you're manning a system, then it's considered to be upgraded by an additional level. And in terms of calculating the ion damage from the pulsar, that will be considered a level 4 system because of the manning bonus. I'll just find an example where our sensors or manned doors get ionized real quick. There's an example. The sensors were ionized, they were being manned, so they were considered to have 4 power in them, and that means the ion damage is 4 plus 2 is 6, over 2 is 3, rounded down is 3. So for subsystems, they take ion damage based on the system level. And if this were to get ionized again while it was still ionized, it would only take an additional 1 ion damage because it's considered to be level 0 at the moment. If you have a Zoltan shield, it will completely protect you from the ion damage of the pulse. Your shield will take either 3 or 4 ion damage. In this case, it took 3. And there's an example where it took 4. As far as I know, it's completely random whether you take 3 or 4 ion damage. Now this does mean that a shield drone can be very useful when fighting at a pulsar, because it can potentially nullify the pulsar completely, if you time it well at least, if it doesn't get taken down by enemy weapons first. However, there is an exception. If you don't have a shield system, and here we have Stealth C, I haven't bought a shield system yet, it doesn't work. This is almost certainly a bug. The pulse is going to ignore the Zoltan shield completely and ionize systems just as usual. So bear this in mind if you're visiting a pulsar with Stealth C. To be clear, if you bought a shield system for this ship, then this would function as a regular Zoltan shield in a pulsar. Now that we know exactly how pulsars function, we can use that information to make better tactical decisions. Pulsar fights can be very dangerous, both because the pulsar takes down your shields and because of the element of randomness. You might get really unlucky and have your weapons taken offline while the enemy weapons stay up, for example. Nevertheless, there are several tactics we can use to tip the odds in our favour. One important defensive tactic is to consider dropping your shields either fully or partially before the pulse hits, with the idea of reducing the time that they are down for. Now you do need to consider the tactical situation, but this is often a good move. I'm going to play purely defensively here. I'm not using my weapons, just to illustrate what happens. So if we don't drop our shields at all, then when the ion pulse hits, we will take 3 ion damage, which takes down our shields for a long time. That's going to be 15 seconds, possibly more if another ion pulse comes in before that expires, and also the recharge time on the shields. So we are really vulnerable, getting torn up. And let's just watch this out. Obviously I should be sending Artemises to drones and so on, but we're not going to do that. And our shields are just coming back on. What we can do instead is drop our shields at the last possible moment to minimize the amount of time that they stay down. I'm going to keep them up to block as much damage as possible in the meantime. We block the heavy laser. I don't think we're going to block the mini beam. Right, so we've left it just long enough to block the first room damage of the mini beam. Something to note here is that there's no benefit in taking your shields down earlier before the pulse hits, with the idea of getting them recharging quicker. It doesn't work like that. If your shields have any power in them, even if they're not up, then they still take ion damage. So now is the right time to drop the shields. And I want to watch very closely to see where the ion damage is applied. Right, engines and doors. Now we can repower our shields. If we got unlucky, then our shields would still have been ionized, but only for 5 seconds. And we took 1 damage there, and just got shield up in time for being drones. This is a lot better, we can keep doing this. Just to make the point. Beam drone is firing. Anything else coming in? I don't think so, so we'll drop the shields. And raise them again. Didn't quite get it up in time for the drone, but we will block the heavy laser. So you can see just by dropping your shields, you can maintain a fairly good defense compared to just doing nothing. One thing to consider when using this tactic is that dropping your shields means that your weapons are more likely to be ionized. So you do need to pay attention to the tactical situation and decide which is the lesser evil. Another useful tactic is to manage the power and position of your weapons. I just want to show you what happens when your weapons get ionized here. Notice that I had 5 weapons power, and that means I took 3 ion damage. So my weapons are going to be down for 15 seconds, except for the heavy ion. Now, one of the problems here is that I actually can't reassign this power. So maybe I want the heavy laser to be powered, but I can't change this while the ion effect is locking the power in my systems. So just remember this for the next example. One tactic you can use at a pulsar is to let the pulsar take down enemy shields for you and then fire your weapons when they are more vulnerable. Now this enemy has a flak 2 and a breach missile. I want to watch the timing very carefully here. So there's the warning just coming in. Now there are 3 things that we want to achieve with our weapons fire. The first one is to fire your weapons before the pulse hits, because if you wait until after the pulse, your weapons might get ionized. The second one is that you want your weapons to arrive at the enemy shield barrier after the pulse hits, so that the enemy shields will be reduced or removed. In this case they have 4 shields, that's going to go down to 1 shield. And the third thing that we want is to have our weapons land in the correct order. So we want the flak to hit first, so it takes down the remaining shield layer. Then we want the heavy laser to hit, which will take offline 1 weapon. And finally we want the heavy ion to hit, which will take the second weapon offline for 10 seconds. Now the timing of this is quite difficult, and at least for me personally, it's not something I can reliably do just by guessing. So I have actually calculated this in advance. It's helpful to know numbers like how long it takes a flak to reach shield. I'm not going to go through all those numbers right now, that's a topic for another time. But I'm going to use crew timing here just to tell me when I should fire my flak. Right about now. And then we want to fire the other 2 weapons as late as possible. The other thing to consider at this point is whether we should drop shields or engines. And I think the answer is yes. If our engines get hit, they'll take 5 ion damage, we'll be down to 3 engines. And similarly, we're only going to have 1 shield up. I think we can get that back up with fairly good odds. So take those systems down completely. Now the other thing I'm going to do here is rearrange my weapons so that the heavy laser stays online no matter what. And I'm firing them now. And I'm also going to depower these 2 so that we only have 1 power in the weapon system. That means that even if our weapons get ionized, they only take 1 ion damage, which is exactly the same amount of damage they take if I took all the power out. So I might as well keep the heavy laser online. And if it gets ionized, it will only be down for 5 seconds. Okay, our engines got ionized for 1, our shields did not get ionized, we can bring them back up. And our weapons did not get ionized, so we can bring them back up. And we're just going to watch what happens here. The flak has hit. Missed the weapons. Heavy laser misses, unfortunately. And then the heavy iron hits. So we got a little bit unlucky there. If the heavy laser had hit as well, then we would have taken down both these weapons. But notice that our shields are coming back up for the flak. And our engines are up as well. And that's it. I hope you found that useful and it helps you deal with Pulsar fights more effectively. I will make this mod that I'm using available to download if anyone wants to have a play with it. It's not very polished or anything, but it's there if you want it.